Okay, let's go with self-introductions. I'm Dick Withnell. Apologize for being late. I left at 9. It just irritates me. You knew me. If you only knew me. Oh, brother, I just don't like this at all. I left at 7:20. Anyway, Dick Withnell, your chair, OEIB.
Good morning, Pam Curtis, chair of the Early Learning Council.
Ron Saxton.
Danny Ledesma with the Governor's Office.
Gerald Hamill from CCWD.
David Mandel, Special Advisor in Early Childhood to Speaker of the House.
Elizabeth Brand, Director of Research and Communications for CCWD.
Marcia Fisher, History Partnerships, Oregon University System.
Doug Wells, Children's Institute.
Lee Chambers, tomorrow's Aeronautical Museum.
Ellen Mackey, Social Venture Partners, Portland.
Sana Andrews, I'm with Portland State. I'm the Provost and Vice President for Academic Affairs.
Whitney Grubbs, Chief of Staff for the OEIB.
Wise, a member of the committee, a member of the HAC.
Yes, welcome everybody. We're planned to meet between 9 and 11 o'clock. I don't know if you saw the latest USA Today statistics. I get all my information from USA Today. But if you want to cut heart attack failure risk, don't just sit there. Both sitting too much, sometimes called sitting disease, anything over 5 hours, you're increasing 50% chance of heart attack. So we'll be under that.
I'm a goner.
We'll be under that. So we don't want anybody to collapse. So anyway.
That was my focus way faster than my mouth.
Yeah, exactly right. Was it Rumsfeld that in his book he says that he only meets for 15 minutes and then a stand-up desk when he was Secretary of Defense? I don't know. That sounds a little weird too, but okay. Approval of January meeting minutes. Any additions or corrections? Stating none, can we by consent approve them?
Yep.
Okay, approved. Okay, Whitney Grubbs, you're up to bat.
Okay. So, we have our Chief Education Officer. I'm going to pass around, just for real brief discussion, the draft, our most recent draft of the Achievement Compact Implementation Report that David Edwards has had been reporting to you on our progress. This is, we should be on track to complete a final version of this this week and send it out more broadly to the field by next week. We have some folks reviewing it right now to ensure that we didn't miss any big recommendations. So this is really, as you all know, one of the seminal pieces of work for the OEIB was the development of achievement compacts. And this year will mark the 3rd year of the Achievement Compact. And so Chief Education Officer Golden wanted us to spend some time talking to the field and really reflecting on the use of the Achievement Compact, getting some clarity around the purpose of the Achievement Compact, and make some recommendations around the future of the Achievement Compact. So this piece is not necessarily coming through this committee. It's a staff piece, but I've provided it to you. And if you have input on it, it will be helpful. Some of the concepts are the same concepts that we'll talk about in the budget priorities and strategies document. I think there's some real good alignment around what we're trying to do in terms of orienting folks around key outcomes and the purpose of the compact as a vehicle to really begin to incent a sense of shared accountability across a broader set of stakeholders, as well as sort of serving as our statewide collective kind of measure of our progress to 40-40-20. So I'll just point out a few of the key recommendations, and then again, please feel free to review it and let us know if there are other things that jump out at you. A lot of the recommendations are around process, really ensuring that the OEIB and the Office of the Chief Education Officer are being responsive to the field in terms of the time they spent actually entering into the achievement compacts. And I think Dr. Golden has made it very clear that if there's any information we're asking from the field, we should be doing something with it. And so some of these relate to sort of our obligation to be more proactive in terms of analyzing the information in the compact, providing the best practices back out to the field, and really our obligation to make those valuable. In addition, I think there's some work to be done, and this really crosses over with what we're going to start talking about today. There's some work to be done with local institutions around how our expectation that they're using their achievement compact to really drive their budget. So how, obviously the state invests significant dollars in education, and the achievement compact really is a tool by which institutions should be looking at those key targets, setting some ambitious but achievable goals, and then making changes to practice and strategy that are really going to drive that. And so, we think there's some more technical assistance to be provided, more clear communication to be provided to institutions to really get people thinking about the compact in that way. Let me think if there's any other real key ones. There is, in the realm of post-secondary, and I was able to attend the HEC subcommittee meeting that Duncan Wise is part of, and this is their sort of achievement compact and investment subcommittee of the HEC, and talked to them a little bit about the current post-secondary achievement compacts and how they might be revisiting those as we really get more clarity around the new post-secondary system and what the purpose of the compact is in relation to potentially new funding allocation formulas in post-secondary. And so they have really taken that charge of thinking about it moving forward. And so in this document, it's really sort of just reiterating that the OEIB should be charging the HEC with thinking about that. And that's really the
If I
approach
can
there.
interrupt you, tell me how does the state of Oregon work with you have individual school districts, and they have somewhat of autonomy, don't they? And they can say what and then I guess I'm thinking like the state of Washington isn't the state like Oregon, I mean like the higher education of the state has authority over all the districts. But we don't have that authority, do we? I mean, we're talking about accountability of getting achievements, but do we have authority?
I think you're mixing two things.
Okay.
There's a difference between Oregon and Washington and how they approach collective bargaining and such, but not with the overall governance of school districts.
Okay.
And so school districts are school districts, and they have the authority. They exist as separate legal entities, and they have the authority to make their budgets and hire and fire and do whatever it is they're allowed to do. The power the state has in Oregon is a power of the budget.
Okay,
The school districts look to the state for money, as well as their various standards and stuff the state can set. So the state can certainly set a variety of standards for performance that every school district has to comply with.
Okay.
But the easier way to think about it is the money comes from the states. So the state can impose whatever strings it thinks are appropriate with that.
Perfect.
Whatever politically
Thanks,
acceptable.
Ron. Good.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
maybe I could just build on that a little bit. I mean, in the system we've put together, we're tight on standards, loose on how it's implemented. But if people are having problems achieving the outcomes on the achievement compacts, then we do first provide support. And what I'll be talking about later is what do we do once we've provided support, and we're still not seeing a school or a university or a community college or early learner provider or a hub getting the results that they need to get. And there is some authority around that, and it's the authority which I'll talk about later for me to direct them to come up with a way of a system to ODE or to Early Learning Council or to the HEC to help come up with a system to do that. So there's definitely accountability, and there's definitely a method we can put in place to help people meet the outcome or to decide what's next if they don't. And one other thing I wanted to just say that I think is critical with this, because Whitney talked about driving budget, but we have to make sure the budget's supposed to drive the outcome. So, for example, I've been in some conversations recently about all-day kindergarten, and I certainly am the first to say we need a strategic investment in all-day kindergarten. But what we're talking about is the facility or the textbook, and I'm like, let's start with what's the program look like that's going to move the dial on kids meeting the third grade benchmark. Then once you can say this is the effective program, you can say what's the cost of the program. So I think we've got to remember all of this is to move the dial on those outcomes that are articulated on the Achievement Compact. That's why this is so critical that people believe in this, know the power it has, and I think that's why it's critical to get the feedback we're getting and to make sure we improve it so it's useful.
And I want to welcome Hannah for joining us. We're all stuck in the traffic. I don't know about yourself. But
Sorry, yes.
No, that's fine. Thank you. Okay. Oh, Pam, I'm sorry.
That's right. I have a comment slash question. So I know that this was done at a point in time where we weren't probably where we wanted to be in terms of these compacts, and that's really my comment slash question. So it seems to me that there are at least two, and maybe more, but at least two important contextual pieces around these achievement compacts, and it's a question about whether, given the timing of this, those two contextual pieces belong in here or at least deserve an honorable mention. So one, with my early learning hat on, is the early learning hubs and the development of those, and the fact that there's a shared outcome between kindergarten readiness there and kindergarten readiness and hubs. And I haven't read this yet, but just in my glance through, I don't see any connector like I see in K-12 or like I see with HEC. So it's a comment slash question. The other contextual piece is, I know and Nancy's been part of these. I know the governor's been out on the road talking about the importance of trying to connect the myriad of regional stuff we do, right? We do regional early learning, we do regional workforce, we do regional environmental stuff, we do regional solutions, we do regional achievement compacts, and I know we've been hearing, communities cry uncle about all of that. Is it appropriate to have at least an honorable mention about that context and how we anticipate or recommend these achievement compacts fit into that puzzle? And again, I know this is at a point in time before all of that.
No,
I did these, but
I think that having that context might very well be appropriate. You will find it also in the budget strategy document that we're going to be talking about next, in a way that I think is even more clear. But there's probably a way.
But if we want to use those as the pivot, as Dr. Golden just said, if we want to use those as the pivot for accountability related to outcomes, I think it's important that they at least are referenced, or even acknowledge that maybe there are other factors that in the next iteration.
Yes.
I don't know the most appropriate way to do that given when this data was gathered, but
I think it's okay. I mean, part of it is about recommendations from all of the contexts that we're getting. So I think that's...
Yeah, this is part of the process coming to you. We're going out to other organizations right now to get more input, and then we'll continue to shape this. So it's definitely a draft.
Anna?
And I apologize for being late and missed the introduction of the document, but I'm really concerned about the compacts, and I understand that we're looking at making changes, but I don't believe that they've done anything to help student achievement at this point. And when they were rolled out, we had these questions and we talked about piloting and giving people feedback, and we did nothing. I want to know, how do we put a plan in place that there will actually be, because one of the recommendations is to give feedback on these, but we get over 200 compacts. Where do we find the time to do that? And is this the right tool to really help us? I have not heard or seen a district who actually used it for their budgeting purposes, which I think was one of the key, and I've talked about this several times, one of the key elements was you create the strategies and tactics, and then you use those to form your budget. If it's not being used that way, if we haven't got that across, then I think we need to step back and really lay out a plan which we're going to do that. I know the interviews, and I don't see David. Is David gone now?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
sorry.
Okay. Because I talked with him a little bit about the interview process and that, and I talked with people from around the state about how their compact committee worked and where they're at right now. And they're not in a good place. I think that we are not utilizing people's time and in a positive way by doing this. So if we don't have a plan to go back and say, okay, here's exactly what we want to do, here's how it's going to be used, here's how we're going to support you, then I think, again, we're wasting people's time. And I don't want to do that. I like the regional consortium idea. I think, building those articulations between different levels is important, from early ed to K-12 and so on. But it's a joke to some people. It really is just a waste of their time. So I'd like to see us really put a plan in place, how we're going to use them.
Well, I agree, we didn't see evidence of anybody using them, and so I think the choice is either decide it's a joke and throw them in the wastebasket, or put some teeth in them so people do pay attention. But where we are is unacceptable.
Absolutely, I agree.
And that's the baseline that we're trying to prove. So, Whitney, any comments on?
No, I appreciate the feedback. I think that's really, I encourage you all to dig in on the recommendations. We did try to put recommendations that are actionable, such that we can really demonstrate follow through and the ability to respond. We did hear from some districts that felt the compact was a powerful tool, but we've heard from a lot of folks who didn't. And so that's, and I did sort of open Hannah with the comment that we feel like there is a lot of communication, technical assistance, and clarity that needs to come from the OEIB and the Office of the Chief Education Officer in order to make them valuable. And then also, Ron, as you mentioned, I think there's some conversation that needs to happen as we move forward, talking about both budget and accountability and how to really make sure that this system is all responsive to, each piece is responsive to the other.
And we agree that they haven't been useful the way they need to, and our intention is to make them that way, or like you say, nice try, but not the right method, but our intention is to really try to get them to be very useful, because they have possibilities.
I absolutely favor us making them useful.
Yeah.
If we throw them in the wastebasket, we've taken a big step backwards.
Yeah.
Hannah, you have a comment?
Yeah, I was just, so we've got large districts, small districts, and I still believe that we should have piloted. I think we made a couple of huge tactical mistakes in the process of sending back the compacts without talking to people and all that. But can we pull together a group of superintendents and leaders who have been on these compact committees and ask them and have them help us create a path forward that none of us have sat on a committee and done it. And I think we should pull in people who have and people who want to make them better and give them the chance to build something. So some superintendents, some key leaders from the association who have been involved in the compacts, and have them help us build something, I think would be a really good step for us and show that we were really listening to them.
Any other comments? Okay, Whitney?
Great. So we're going to move on to item 4.0, which is a discussion of the 15-17 budget strategies and initial priorities. And I'll just spend a moment giving a little reminder of the context and the timeline. So this subcommittee, I think, is charged with the really critically important work of helping to frame up for the rest of the education system a sense of the priorities and strategies that you all feel are most important for moving the dial and really making a difference on the outcomes we want to make a difference on. It's a somewhat iterative process as the governor is moving along with his process of developing a recommended budget, and we all engage in the process sort of alongside that process. And so at this point, I'll just give you a sense of what we think the timeline is, and it's the same thing I shared with you last meeting, but just a reminder. So this paper, which Duncan will talk a little in a minute, he refers to it as budget instructions. It's nothing that technical. It's really a policy paper that's designed to highlight the places that we think the system should be focusing and the priorities for the next biennium. This paper is in front of you today for the first viewing, hoping that we can dig in somewhat to get feedback today, as well as you sending me feedback by email or however you want to moving forward. The full board will have an opportunity. I will then revise it, and the full board will have an opportunity to look at it in the March meeting, and to provide some feedback that will then come back to you again in your March meeting, with more work happening until I hope that in April the OEIB can adopt it. And the chief education officer would then sort of deliver it along with a charge to agencies, the other boards in the system, the other OEIB subcommittees, and the sort of public and stakeholders at large to be thinking about budget strategies and priorities in a way that's consistent with this paper. So it's really the first step in the budget process, but I think an incredibly critical step. What we saw in the last biennium is it took a while for people to get a sense of what this different kind of budgeting strategy was, but the way that we laid it out really did help drive us in making some progress around it as a more of an outcomes-based thought process in budgeting. So I'm going to let Duncan say a few words. He's spent some time thinking about sort of this, the importance of laying out strategies and priorities in something like this, and so I invited him to weigh in.
Thanks, Whitney. And Pam and Whitney and I sat in a room for 6 weeks doing this, and I think we have had a lot of learning. There's 5 of us in the budget process, and I guess I would just remind this committee as a starting point how different this process is from traditional budgeting. And to me, it's the most exciting opportunity we've seen in my lifetime. I mean, it's a big deal for education, but it is so very different that I think we made headway last time, and I think we've made some good improvements that I would encourage us to think really boldly this time about how to make it ever more effective. And so just as an introduction, if I might, just to remind you of the differences of what we're talking about. Traditional budgeting is basically organized around the status quo. You start with what you have, you roll that up with inflation, current services, and then the question you ask in the budget process is either, what would I do with incrementally more money, or what would I cut if I had less money? And that's what the question of the budget process is. The assumption is, whatever you're doing now is fine, and that's going to continue, and then you add or subtract to it. And if you're comfortable with the delivery as it exists, it's fine. It's a good process. If things are okay, but as Whitney's paper says, we're talking about transforming the education system over the decade ahead. And if we're going to, pre-K through higher ed, and if you're going to do that, you don't use the current service budget. That's the worst tool to use because it reinforces everything you're doing and doesn't really encourage innovation. And so the process we began last biennium is conceptually entirely different. It's conceptually, the starting point isn't with the base budgets. The starting point, and you have to obviously think about those, and I don't want to suggest you completely abandon them, but the starting point is, what are the outcomes we're looking for students? And of course, the OEIB set the outcomes with the 5 broad categories. And then the question is, given those outcomes, how much do we want to allocate to different parts of the continuum And then how do we spend those dollars most wisely, including making policy changes to get more outcomes. And so what you're inviting the field, the participants to do, is not to tell us what they're doing now, but to imagine what they could be doing in different ways with different resources and to improve the system. And so, again, I just want to stress how different that is from a traditional budget process. And it's I think for those participating on both ends, certainly from the governor's office making those decisions, the legislature, it's very exciting. But I think we should equally acknowledge that if it's done properly, it's incredibly exciting for the folks involved in presenting the budgets, because they get to think through how they could do things differently, what changes in state practice policy would make a difference. So when you have, for example, the achievement compacts, to my mind, achievement compacts should communicate back to Nancy, what changes do we need from Nancy and the state agencies and the state infrastructure to help us do our job better? And those would be the kinds of questions that could come up through this budget process. It should really be a real conversation with the field if it's done properly. To make that work last time, and Pam will recall this, and Wendy, I'll just pass this out, and I'm not proposing to use this specifically, but one of the key tools we used was what we called a results map, which is really just a way of thinking about what we're trying to do in terms of strategy. And I know the OEIB has adjusted, and I'm not proposing this directly. I think it makes sense to do something like this. And I think Whitney's paper gets at this already. So I know, but I think visuals sometimes help. At least they help me. Sorry, I don't have enough for everybody. But the way we conceived of it really was that, okay, if we're trying to transform the education delivery system, we start at the top, what are the fundamental learner outcomes? We've got the 40-40-20 goal, and then we have the OEIB's goals that you've set along the way. And we start with an understanding of how we're doing in each of those elements. We measure how we're doing, and we will also understand, to begin to think about how much do we think is reasonable to spend in these areas of state investment. Then the second level, and most of the money, frankly, then comes from the state out. 98% of the money comes out into those learning outcomes. And the question is how much do you invest in these different areas, and how do you invest? What are the tools? What are the investment strategies? And then the middle bar was really about the core strategy that I think we've articulated of what is it going to take to achieve these learning outcomes? What changes in practice and delivery are we imagining are necessary that we would want to invest in to make a difference? And so the core and the community level change is what we call learner-centered teaching and learning. That is the idea we've been talking about, and more customized, if you will, learner-centered practice across the continuum. And then to support that, we had these other 5 categories of change. Effective educators, that was viewed as the most top priority, Pam, we would call them, and that's why we recommended that large investment in educators. Well, to do learner-centered, the educators are absolutely key. We've got to make sure they're getting the support they need. But then these other areas, and we had specific ideas in each of those. And again, in each of these areas, you invite proposals from parties to make a difference. And then finally, we had this concept of state infrastructure, and we defined what we thought Nancy and all should be doing at the state level to support the vision. And these are the categories at the time, and then you put budgets together for the state infrastructure to achieve these particular features and make sure you're measuring, do we have a longitudinal data system that's serving all the needs? And that should be a question in the budget process, and one of the metrics Nancy's accountable for. So this creates a framework for the outcomes and a starting point for asking, what are we looking for in the next budget cycle and beyond, and what investments and policy changes do we need to make. So I use this as an example, again, just to remind us how big a deal this is, how different it is. And then, to me, again, to Whitney's point, the most important part of this process is at the very beginning to ask the right questions of the folks so that we get good answers. We can give people time to really respond and give us good answers.
So I want to ask one of the questions up front. The paper, inspiring, wonderful, I love all of it. But I loved all of it in 2011 when we said it too. So it's now 2014, and we've made maybe baby steps, but we haven't made very many steps towards accomplishing any of this. When we talk about investing for outcomes, I know how to do that. You know how to do that. What we've seen is a legislature and governor who are unwilling to move more than 1% or 0.5% or something of the budget to anything other than funneling it to the traditional ways. So do we have some commitment here that we're talking about real changes? Because as long as we have a model that says, we can keep saying continued service level is a bad approach, but it's what the governor and the legislature did again. And so if that's the approach that the people in power are going to keep taking, I don't see how we get to this. Where's the fundamental change that says we're going to stop doing that and start doing something different?
Well, just as a participant from a receiver of this, the HEC, I can promise you, is looking fundamentally at how we fund post-secondary education. So we'll have proposals. If you set goals for the HEC, I think it's pretty clear to me that, given the conversations, and Gerald is nodding here, we're thinking very fundamentally about how you invest in higher ed. And it won't be the same. Given where we are, it cannot possibly be the same because of the structural changes that have been made.
So in terms of doing that for early learning, or particularly K through 12 here, where does that courage come from for K through 12?
Well, I'm not going to answer that. I mean, I guess this is probably more but I think the answer is you have to, the question, you have to be very clear on what the outcomes are and say we're very open to looking at the way we deliver services and how we fund it to get to those outcomes. And so I think it requires a honest look at the delivery system.
That's the cynicism I'm pushing back on.
Okay.
We're in our 4th year of the inspirational vision, and we have yet to see the willingness to budget tough.
So the approach that we are taking is we clearly are working with the governor and the governor's staff to come up with some very focused priorities, which we're still in the process, in a strategic planning process to complete. In addition to that, from OEIB, we working with our partners care about all of those outcomes on the compact, but there's a few we're saying we absolutely need to focus on. And one, for example, is 3rd grade reading, because we know 4 times as many kids graduate. We know remediation after 3rd grade, 75% of the kids never get remediated, and think of all the money in remediation. And we need to put together a very powerful, cohesive argument that when we present it to legislators, they really believe that that's going to get better outcomes for kids than the current system. And that's the challenge in front of us, and I think we'll be really capable of doing that, and that's our intention. I mean, in the end, it's our job to help them to make our case, and it's their job to figure out whether our case is better than the last case, because that's the control. But I think you'll see some very focused.
I guess my point, and I know I'm being harsh, my point is I think we've got a great vision. It's exciting. It's been exciting for a long time. I don't think we need to keep refining the exciting vision. I think we need to figure out how in the world we're going to move forward making it happen.
Yeah. And so just my view is this process is the most powerful tool to do that. And that's why I think it's worth spending the time up front, really thinking how it's going to work to get what you want. Because in the end of the day, you as a member of the OEIB should have confidence that if you deliver this budget and the legislature delivers it, you will have very clear results that you would anticipate. You can honestly say, I think with these changes and these dollars, we can get these results because we've talked with the field and they seem committed with us to do this, and we've got the appropriate policy changes, structural change, whatever they are, that we think we can get it done. And that's the power of this process, but we have to use it. And that's, I think, we started last time. I think it could be a lot better, and that's what I think our opportunity is.
Yeah.
So I appreciate the work that was done in the last round of looking at the budget process, but I don't think that there was any real use of the compact data that those people who said, here's what we need, we didn't really look at it. We threw out 10 priorities, we sent them out to the field, and the field basically said they didn't like them. I mean, in the forums, they said they didn't want to talk about those things, they wanted to talk about other things. I think we have a path right now, a very exciting path, where we have the Tell Oregon survey out right now. It's asking every educator in this state, tell us what you need. If we're not going to listen to those people who work with our students every day, if we don't trust them that they are going to bring forward ideas that will help us improve students, then I think we need to trust them. And I think that data will be extremely helpful. I also believe that as we're looking at the compacts, and I know Dr. Golden has really made a concerted effort to reach out and look at what's going on in the field and talk with her former colleagues to find out what they need. But as we do this, This is a great fluffy document, but this is not something that Oregon parents will read and understand what's going on. We have to take it to the field and have it so we can say, here's the vision, and here's simply, these are the things that are going to make a difference for students without having it a 20-page document. And I think that's where we get the buy-in and the commitment to really doing something different. I love the new flyer that Dr. Golden did. It lays things out. It's very clear. And it speaks to the hopes and dreams and the hearts of education. That's, I believe, where we're going to make a difference. We can talk all we want about some of the strategies in the 40-40-20, but they want to hear about their child and how we're going to make a difference for them. So I'm really excited about the opportunity to listen to what is needed and then to put it together, and then people will commit to doing it when they've actually been listened to. So,
how do we answer the tension there of listening to the field and what have you, and the cynic says, well, look what the outcomes have been. How do we have that dialogue?
I love that question. Educators have not been able to do what they believe is right for their students for decades now. They've been forced to do things that don't make sense for their students, and they've said it over and over and over again. And it's not just OEA members who are leaders in this state. It's educators who aren't involved in the union, but they care about their students. It's administrators. It's our principals and superintendents who are saying these things don't make sense for kids. But there's strings tied to dollars that we get from the federal government and from the state that say, you must do this. Let's be bold enough as the OEIB and the subcommittees of the OEIB to put forward what will really help our students be successful and push back on the crazy ideas that are coming down that are forcing us to do things that don't make sense for kids. We spend a whole lot of money on a whole lot of things that don't help students achieve in school. And parents see it, educators see it, but because that money's attached to it, we do it anyway. So let's do what we know is right.
To me, what you just said is a key part of the budget process, of this kind of a budget process. That it's getting that feedback to say, because again, the question is, how do we spend the dollars we have most wisely? And what we need to hear from the field, and the field, defining how we get information is a key question. How you get that information to say, okay, we can get better results by changing, whatever, exactly what you described, these regulations, rules, and we'll get better results. That's exactly what this process should do. And again, with the accountability saying, okay, now here are the measures, let's make sure we're moving the dial, we have a way of measuring and monitoring progress. That's what tight loose management is in my mind. And we need a budget process that supports that kind of thinking. And again, I think, Ron, the issue is partly of design. I think the will is, frankly, it's a really complicated design problem to do this well. Because frankly, a lot of the budget process doesn't come from the field, it comes from, it's agglomerated in K-12, it's agglomerated, and I love the Quality Ed Commission, but it's agglomerated through that commission, and we don't have a way of really hearing what the opportunities are, and we need to think about that, about how to get information to promote innovation. But I guess all I was saying is I would encourage us to think deeply about that now, because once you get into the budget process, it just starts rolling, and then you get lost.
So how do we get from here to something that makes that happen? I'm sorry.
No.
That's why I'm putting it on the table now. I guess what I'm encouraging us to do, Nancy, is really spend deep time right now, this next month, for this March and the next meeting. I really, again, having watched this for so many rounds, if you get it right, if we don't get it right in April, we started in June and we were way too late.
Yeah.
Right. Your reflection. You were there too, and you can tell me, am I on track here?
Well, no, I actually think everybody's on track.
Yeah.
And I was going to say something similar to what almost everybody has said. I think Duncan's right. This is an important. I would call it an important framework for doing the kind of budgeting that we all hope to do. But I was frustrated. I spent lots of hours, as Duncan has already mentioned, with him and Whitney and others, but frustrated by some of the same things that Ron just talked about, which is what came out of it were some strategic investments. And those are really, really important. But if what we do in the good time is just add strategic investments.
Welcome to Unified
which is-
Conferencing.
Thank you.
Glad to be here. But I mean, what that effectively does is add money in certain places that we think are strategic in the good times, and then thin the soup in the bad times because of the way that we budget, and never fundamentally get to the issue of what are the strings attached to, and if we could detach or attach in different ways, could that get us better outcomes? So I think a couple of key questions maybe for our process, and I don't know how we do this, Whitney, Nancy. What is our latitude in terms of flexibility for how we go about doing what we're doing? So this whole notion of stakeholder engagement, that's my generic term for what you were talking about, I think is really important. We need to listen and gather a lot of information. Hannah outlined some, but do we have latitude to do that? Is it just this committee? How do we, what's our flexibility in going through this process? And then my other question really was about sort of what's the altitude? What's the latitude? What's the altitude? Are we just supposed to recommend strategic investments, or can we recommend fundamental changes? And if we recommend fundamental changes, then the question is, for us strategically, do we pick a couple of these and go deep and try to do it really well? Or do we take a broader approach in terms of sustaining the fundamental changes in process, not just an outcome? Because in order to change the outcome, you got to change the process of how you get there. Not just add more resources, because to Dick's point, more into what you're currently doing is just going to get you more where you currently get.
And then also, though, do we bring in the other things of, where we talk about attendance, unemployment, Curry County being at 56% poverty level, where Selwood is 5%, or Sherwood, I guess, excuse me. Was it Selwood? Sherwood, yeah, the highest, there. So how do we get, and we have the Vernonia situation. Do we bring in all those other things that are going to be part of the high tide?
I think that's a hugely important. We have to
bring that in.
I mean, we just set the goals. I think you have to think about poverty and.
So, what is the flexibility for process of this group?
Yeah.
So that's a great question. I think this, like I described early on, it's a very iterative process, and I think it's really ours to design. I think one thing I want you to keep in mind is I do think there needs to be something for people to react to. I think, and it doesn't have to be a 20-page paper, but I think that the work of this subcommittee does need to be in defining sort of what it wants people to respond to in order to really get feedback that's meaningful. And I think that's what we've tried to do here, which is to bring the feedback that folks have given us for 3 years now. I mean, there's only so many places to start, and so I think that's one thing. I think you just need to be cognizant of how you design a process. I think the public nature of this meeting in and of itself is a process to invite feedback, and that can be designed in any way that you want it to be. I think there's latitude to do things like go out and do forums in the community, but I just want us to be thoughtful about how they're designed and that they're giving people something to react to and not, creating an opportunity that's less valuable. Then with the altitude, I mean, I think, Pam, you're absolutely right. This isn't about strategic investments, and in fact, this group could recommend that strategic investments aren't, that they're not a strategy that's useful. I think choosing a few spots and going deep helps, because the problems that we encountered last biennium was that in getting the legislature and others to wrap their mind around it, you have to go deeper than conceptual, and going deep in a few areas helps people to understand what it is that that how the design is different. So that's just my feeling. But I think there's tons of openness and, the
So how do
ability
you think that
to.
would look, though? If we want to go deep in a couple areas, what do you think that looks like?
Well, I think the other concept that goes along with going deep is being proactive as opposed to reactive, and that is something the governor has said since he was on the campaign trail. Money invested in early intervention or third grade reading pays much bigger dividends than.
But do you see that not just being a little add-on test project, but actually
Right.
saying of the core budget, we're requiring you to spend a big chunk on third grade learning, and here's how we're going to measure big chunk? Or how does that work? What does that look like?
Yeah, it could be something like that. I mean, in addition to what goes out to the buildings, it could be a strategic investment, but very focused around that area.
I mean, can I try to take a stab at one? And I love, because in your paper you do two areas that I think are really 3 to 3, and then this 10 to 14. I mean, those are two key.
Yeah.
Right, so just what does that look like?
So to me, on the 3 to
Agree.
3, you say to the field, okay, we're looking for plausible amounts of money. We understand we're going to spend more money, but we've got to spend it in a way that delivers on this outcome. And there are probably a number of ways to crack that. But what we would need from the field are plausible strategies, probably tying, some of the early learning into kindergarten, like we've seen it in certain places. I don't know if you guys, Pam knows a lot more than I do about that, and all they do. But we would have to have a plausible structure that would be presented to say, if we invest, we are confident that we've done the deals with the field, that we're confident that Nancy's going to get, substantial improvement on third grade reading, and we're committed, and she's committed to put herself on the line to get that done, and the field is equally committed. And so I don't know what that would look like, because it would, as Hannah said, may have some significant changes in regulations. Possibly, I don't know what it would look like, but it would be a comprehensive set of budgets and
Well, it helps, but
policies.
if our budget, if we sit here and we're talking about doing something in the next 6 weeks or something, I mean, if we think we want to, if we want a budget that's going to emphasize third grade reading, that's a priority. The governor said it was, we said it is, everybody said it is. The budget isn't getting it done now.
So we say, what's it going to take?
And just giving more money to school districts and saying, we wish you'd improve third grade reading, we've been doing that. That isn't getting it done.
Exactly.
So if we're going to do something more targeted at trying to impact third grade reading, are you, Nancy, telling us what that education policy is, and then we're going to say people ought to require districts to spend money on that policy? Or I'm just having trouble. What does that mechanically look like? If we all think we want third grade reading improved, we all think we ought to be targeting investment to improve third grade reading, so what do we do?
So I think there has been some beginnings of this one. If you look at, remember ODE is the place that provides the support and the accountability. They've identified the 15% lowest performing schools. They have also identified model schools.
Right.
We're supposed to learn from those model schools. Those are beat the odds schools, same kind of kids as in the priority and focus, who are beating the odds. So we learn from what they do, and it's not surprising that what they do is aligned with evidence-based best practices and using the tight, loose, tight with everyone else but those 15%, and maybe 15% is not the right money, so you invest in another 15%. We're letting them have the standards and figure out how to go about it. But for the 15% lowest performing, we are coming in tighter and creating interventions that really take the practices that we see in the model schools and work with the staff to talk about how do we get those practices in your school. Now, since we've done that, and we're a year and a half into a 4-year intervention, and these aren't exact numbers, but they're pretty close, out of, I think there's 94 schools, 35 of them have gone from a level 1 on a report card to level 3. This is a year and a half into what we believe should take us 4 years. Another, about the same amount, have gone, they haven't moved, but they're putting the practices in place that we believe will move them, and they really have 4 years to do it. There are about 10 or 12 that don't appear to be going in the right direction. They appear to be going in the wrong direction, and the coaches who work with them notice things very different in those schools. And what they're noticing are things like maybe not the right leader. not a person who has the instructional knowledge or the capacity to work through other people to cause the change they need to cause on that. Sometimes it's just that the staff's been together too long, you need an infusion of a few different people. Or so you know, we're starting to...
You know, and I understand, and I'm 100% supportive of that intervention where we need to intervene. But as a statewide budget process and program, what is it we do if we want to say third grade needing regional attention as a statewide basis in the statewide budget? What is it the governor and the legislature need to do to advance third grade reading? Not just in the 15% that are having trouble, but as a statewide goal everywhere.
So I love that you're asking that question, because I think that the starting point that we're at here for this subcommittee is for you all to decide on some places where you want to see some of these models and innovative ideas over the next few, 4 or 5 months, so that when it comes to making recommendations to the governor, there could be a very bold recommendation around an entirely different way of funding for the third grade outcome. I think I think this conversation and framework is to try to land on a couple of, and maybe we've already landed, and maybe that's why it's frustrating, because we have outcomes and sort of key things, but I think there could be...
the importance of third grade reading and the importance of blending the end of it forever. I haven't heard anybody disagree with that forever. To me, the issue is, okay, what does that mean we're going to do to actually cause that agenda to advance?
Yeah, and then I think there could be an examination of different kinds of tools. I mean, an examination, and I tried to lay out in there, when you look through, there's a place where it's sort of inviting you to flesh out, is it some kind of an incentive funding model? Is it some kind of a blended model with early learning funding where we're really incenting that? Is it, I think it's, the tools are whatever we want to make them, but we don't have all the answers, so we need to find some places to really go deep, and then invite, broadly people to be thinking about creative ways of getting at it.
Back, if you were telling us, Nancy, that schools that are making satisfactory progress on third grade reading are doing X, and schools that aren't making satisfactory progress on third grade reading aren't doing X, then we could say we recommend to the governor and the legislature that you insist school districts do X. But absent knowing what that is, and it's not nearly that simple, obviously, it's not clear to me we can say please do better on third grade reading. We can say please put more effort into third grade reading, but it's not clear to me how we in fact advance third grade reading. I understand the goal. That's why I keep. There are lofty goals to say we want better third grade reading. It's a lofty goal to say let's tie funding to achieving it. The mechanics of what are we going to do in the budget that in fact improves third grade reading?
So there, every school is different. There are 33 elementary schools in Beaverton. And I can go from school to school, and I can walk into the staff room, and I can tell you a whole lot about the atmosphere. Any of us can. You can walk in and feel, how is that going? So that makes a difference in student learning. It really...
In my business, you walk into the restrooms.
Oh.
Seriously.
So, I mean, it is, there are lots of indicators. I would say practice right now, in schools across the state, they're making decisions to reduce class size in primary grades to increase third grade reading. I mean, we do that all the time. The fifth grade in the past used to take, 26 so that the primary could have 22. Now they're taking 34 so they can have 29. So they're doing that. But I would go back to the compacts. We have data that has been given to us the last couple of years. And in there, one of the benchmarks is third grade reading. So they should have created strategies and tactics to help them improve third grade reading. So one of the recommendations is to look at what they told us. So I would say, what have they told us? What are those key strategies that the administrators and teachers in each one of those districts believe they need to put in place? And then see, are we doing that? How do how do you invest in that? So you can tell them, we want you to include or improve third grade reading. What do you want them to take away? What do you want them not to do in order to get there is one of the questions that would be asked. You know, the do more with less has been used. Well, I don't know that we can do any more with less, and we can't do more with what we have if we're not allowed to differentiate and do what we believe is right. And that's those strings that I talked about. Strings are attached, you're told you have to do this and that. So again, I think once we step back and allow people to create, when schools are really thriving, some of these priority schools that Nancy is mentioning, they've come together, the staff and the coach have come together and created what they need. And they're doing some great things. It's making sure that they are trusted in doing that.
Mm-hmm. So, but if the approach is tell them we want them to do better and then leave them alone to design how to do it. And if they do a good job, we applaud them and that's wonderful. And if they don't do a good job, Nancy intervenes. Okay, that's an okay model. It's not, I mean, it's a budget model. That's just an enforcement model.
Well, so here's,
Sure.
I mean, I think what we're talking about right now is a great conversation. We should have an answer for it in November. And in the sense of this, if the OEIB and the governor say currently third grade, I don't know, 70% of folks are reading, we want to be wherever it is. It's a significant increase, and you could look at it by schools. By November, we would need an answer to say, with this amount of money, we'd look at how much money we're spending in that area, whatever the amount of money is, Nancy, because she's been talking with Hannah in the field, has got a plausible case to be made that if you put this amount of money, you're going to see this kind of improvement, you know, year by year over the next 4 years. And there are some consequences if those aren't met that would be explained. I mean, there would be both the strategy of how to get there and what happens if you don't get there. And I don't know what that would look like. I can imagine it. But if that's what the OEIB says it wants, then I would argue we need a process that does all the, you know, that gets us there. And then obviously Nancy will continue to work with the schools she's working with. But that is the budget process. And it's not it's not just about the money, it's how the money is spent and what the consequences of it, you know, the results not happening, and it, you know, so you have the feedback loop. So, but that's hard work. I mean, that's, and that's why I think what Whitney's saying, let's pick a few targets and really understand what's involved in each of those through the budget process so that we have a really strong case that you're comfortable to say, yeah, I think we can get there because we've thought it through. Is that Nancy? Yes.
Well, I think, you know, when it really comes down to it, I mean, first of all, just in terms of third grade reading, I want to say we're starting at birth to the, you know, kindergarten, and that with a real focus on age 3 to grade 3. So a lot of the work, something that's different is there's been a much bigger investment in early learning. There's been the development of the Early Learning Council that has a lot of huge expertise around early learning. Programs eventually that are making a difference are going to get the resource, and programs who aren't. Daycare centers are going to be 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, which ones really help do the pre-literacy skills, and hubs are going to come together to do that, you know, integrated work, and we're going to continue to see which ones are making a difference. But I think where the real rub comes eventually, like if you say, when you say, Ron, then if we know what works, just are we going to tell the other people to do it? Well, one thing we know that works is you can't just tell people. You have to go in and coach them. You have to give them training. That's exactly what we're doing now. That's kind of what Hannah's talking about. If you take a skilled coach who comes in with the staff and shares the research best practices and works with them to move there. So what you might do, and this will be where the rub comes, because our model is give more money to the floor and make some strategic investments. Certain people are going to say we just want more to the floor going out. But we might want to say no, there needs to be a little more to the floor, but more to the strategic investment around that allows you to get from the lower 15% to the lower 40% of schools and provide the intervention that we're seeing is making a difference. But that's where the tough conversation is going to be, because some people believe schools need more money, and I believe that deeply too. But I have to say, when I was superintendent, I cut that budget from 120 million to 89 million, and we got better results with less money. And I'm not saying we need less, but just money alone doesn't get you better results. You need more money, and you need to use the practices that make a difference, and you need to start early. So that's what you could suggest.
That pivot, which I think is our assignment, where I just struggle with, I don't think we have any difficulty or disagreement about what we think a better system would be accomplishing. And so we know what we want. We know we want to have a system that delivers it, is accountable for delivering it, and so forth. I don't think we have a very good idea how to use the budget process to advance that. And so, at least I don't. And so that's the struggle.
So I'm curious to know if you think there might be some value in the one hand sort of trying to find where identify outcomes and places where we can make proactive investments, but I wonder if there's some other value into looking at where in the current budget system where there might be disincentives to learning, or using the current system and trying to find, like you said, Anna, where there might be strings or ways that are sort of impeding on the outcomes that we want to achieve, and to attack that sort of base budget system through that lens.
Yeah, that's it. That absolutely.
Are you an E5, 6, or 7 with that chevron you have on there?
I think
About cars, right?
No, I'm talking about the National Guard.
Is that a Star Trek reference?
I'm talking about Vietnam is what I'm talking about. There's also a piece of our success, though, is the communities. I mean, the communities has to have some ownership in this thing, too. So, I mean, if we can instill in communities, the parents to read to their kids and all that kind of stuff, I get a little bit nervous when the OEIB is going to answer it, or does the teachers do it all? I mean, I get nervous about that. I think the friggin' community needs to get off their butts and do something, too. So, and I'm talking to myself. Yes?
So, I have a suggestion. Because it seems that we're dancing around, sort of, what the heck do we do with this assignment, right? How do we proceed? And I was looking at our meeting schedule and getting really nervous at the meeting 2 hours every month is not going to accomplish.
Just finding the time that we can meet.
I know. Given that last summer or whenever this, 2 summers ago, whenever it was, that we spent days, weeks together in a room. So this is not perfect, but here's my suggestion, just for reaction's sake, that we engage at least in a 4-step process. Step 1 is to ask staff to review and synthesize the data that we have from communities. And the data includes things like the Tell Oregon survey. It includes the community data analysis that hubs have had to do in their hub application. It includes the data from the regional achievement complex and so on. There's a lot that we've been asking people to do, and we ought to use it. So to gather that, to synthesize it, and to tell us back what it's saying. Second thing we ought to do is to put an evidence-based screen over what communities are saying in terms of what they need or what they want to do, so that we are trying to gather from both of those. There's evidence about what works, and then there's professional opinion about what works, and they're both valid. And if we have a merger of the two, then we're pretty strong. So I'm suggesting the second step is a evidence-based overlay. The third step I would suggest, and it's kind of a 4-parter, is that we then take that information, and that we do this with 2 or 3 areas in order to go deep. Grade 3, age 3 to grade 3 is one, maybe, I don't know what the others are, the 11 to 14 thing that's in here. The third step is then to take that information and make recommendations about A, what we fund, B, what we don't fund or don't do anymore because there are disincentives to get to the outcomes and the evidence, what the evidence tells us we can do. C, are there areas where we recommend policy changes or other changes around the budgeting? And 4, that we take a peek at what that means in terms of the infrastructure and the capacity necessary to deliver these both at the state and at local communities. And then lastly, but not least, that we engage in some sort of community stakeholder input about what we finally do with. So we start with what communities tell us and we go back to communities at the end. So just to get us off the dime.
No, I think that's great. I want to add, though, or go back, I guess, the answer to me is a budgeting discussion. If what we're trying to do is come up with, it's our assignment. The notion of are we on a model that's mostly give education providers money and tell them what we want and see how they do and then react if they don't do well? Or do you see a model that is different than that, I guess?
I hope that my hope in putting I know you asked that to Nancy, and I'm going to interrupt, I apologize.
No.
But my hope in putting forth that process, or whatever process we end up on, is that we be courageous and take a leap of faith, that we're really going to do it differently this time. Because if we don't recommend something different, then the governor's not going to do anything different, neither the legislature. So at least, even if they choose not to, we can create some dissidence, which I think is an important step in the change process. So I don't want to go through this if we're not going to be bold about what it is that we're going to recommend. And I'm not in favor of just recommending strategic investments, more money on, and you've done a good job of listing them. There's 20 some that we did last time.
So I'm not in favor of that, and I'm not in favor of just hoping people do better now that we clarify what we want from them and then reacting if they don't. I don't think there's anybody who doesn't know we've been trying to improve third grade reading for 50 years. And so just hoping they do a better job with it now that we identify it isn't a realistic strategy.
Yeah.
So I would say, how do we believe that the people sitting in this room right now are going to have the best thoughts to get it done in a short period of time? I think we're, we have been, people were told what to do. They were told what the strategic investments were going to be. They didn't buy into the strategic investments. There's no commitment to doing the things. And if we're really going to see change, then people have to buy in and commit that they believe it's right for their students and their children, and then they're going to do it. And we keep saying, well, the class of 2025 was kindergartners last year. Yes, it was. And we have a class of 50 kindergarten students with a first-year teacher. We are not doing what we need to do. So let's stop trying to go fast to get something done that we're not prepared to do. The TELS survey goes until March 24th. It will be over. We'll have the results back in about the 1st of May. I think we need to really look at it. We need to look at the compacts as they come in and say, okay, here's what we've learned. I love your first step of really looking at the data that we have. But I understand there are timelines for budgets. I get it. But if we're going to get it right, we have to make sure that we've been thoughtful in the process. Because you can tell, a principal can walk into a staff meeting and say, here's what we're going to do. And you're going to do it tomorrow, and we're going to implement this program. If the educators do not believe that that's going to help their students and they don't have the training that they need to do it, it's not going to work, and that's what we've done for the last 2 decades. We need to stop. Educators are ready and willing to do whatever it takes to have their students be successful. We need to put some trust in them if we're going to move the dial.
I don't disagree with you. I think that's why we need to listen to what not just educators are saying in the TELS survey, but we have a number of different opportunities out. And I think it's the point that somebody made earlier in the meeting. We shouldn't be asking people to submit information that we aren't going to do anything with. We ought to do something with, and that's, I think, the first step in all of this. But I do think that we need to move on something. Pick one area, pick 2 areas.
And let me just add, because I didn't say parents, I strongly believe that what you said, Dick, about the parents and community really committing. We have to bring people together, and that's part of the power of us doing something with the OEIB to really engage everyone, all of the stakeholders in this process. But I think we have to have a thoughtful process to make it happen.
So how would you amend my process to make it more thoughtful?
I think it's going to take more time. If we want to have, really understand, we either have to take the compact data that was turned in last year and trust that people really understood what they were supposed to do and look at that, and then the survey, and then parent and community engagement. How do we get that? I don't think that happens in the next 2 months.
Yes, but
Can I make a friend? I agree with that. And again, I think this whole process should be about hearing. And that's why, I guess, my amendment to this, I like all the steps. But I think we up front have to have a conversation. And I totally understand what you're saying. I totally agree with you, Hannah, about this in the field. But for the field to be useful in giving feedback, they need a structure. And the structure to me would have at least three things. One is an understanding of the current performance of the system. We should share what the data looks like today on student outcomes around the 5 areas at the OEIB. So we need to present that and make sure everyone understands where we are. And we need to think about, where we want to be. And we also need to understand how much money we're investing currently in each of those areas. So people have a starting point of understanding, how much per student are we spending in these different areas, what's going on. And then, and then I think we do need a frame of what we think at the highest level, and I think Nancy's got it, and Whitney's in the paper, she's got it, what we think it's going to take to achieve it. To me, without getting into this in more detail, what I think this did, and obviously we haven't gone through it today, I think we answered that question, frankly, the way you would answer it, Hannah, which is we want student-centered learning, and teachers are at the core of that, and you have to trust the teachers. But to do that, you have to have, it's a very different design, and we have to support the teacher. We have to provide the resources of professional development to enable that to happen. And that was really, I think, the theory that we came up with last time. So, I think but I don't think the field heard that, because I don't think we ever really communicated the strategy as clearly as we needed to. In those community meetings, we had 2 minutes to present something we'd spent a month on. And so people never really heard what we're talking about, that this fundamentally is about empowering teachers and giving more autonomy locally and allowing the flexibility and all of that. But we need to say that. But we need to say that as through, Nancy, we need to articulate through Nancy, and maybe obviously the key to understand, to articulate it, what we think it's going to take. And then you go out to the field with that, and then I think they can give really authentic, high-quality feedback pretty quickly. It won't be in 2 months, but it will be by the summer, so that we can then get feedback and make more intelligent decisions. But I think we have to really create a process up front where the field understands what we're trying to do, so they can give good quality feedback.
Nancy and Whitney, can you guys come to it with a timeline on some suggestions made here, and we work back from a date, whether it's...
Well, I have a couple thoughts. And I think your process, Pam, was really thoughtful, and that I think that is how we need to be framing it. I'm a little with Duncan on the fact that the reviewing and screening of data from communities and the evidence-based screen is what we've been doing, what we've asked our OEIB subcommittees to do, what the HEC is doing, what the ELC is doing. So we have a lot of processes where we've asked people to sort of tell us the key things, and so I just want to be cognizant of using those vehicles that we have in place, and not instead creating a different process that's running parallel to the vehicles that are examining these very things that you've talked about. So, and in that same realm, I think there's something of a tension between the need for this subcommittee to go deep, and I love that idea because, Ron, you've hit on it. This is not easy. It's really, really hard to think about how you would actually present something transformative, and I think this subcommittee's energy going to a couple places on that would be great. And I mean, not you going, you charging us with digging and bringing back some proposals would be fantastic. We still need some sort of a larger frame, because if we only go deep on a few places, we're leaving people out of a lot of feedback that they've given around the importance of investing in educators, and many of the things in here wrap around services, counseling, and post-secondary, the work the HEC's doing around the budget model. I mean, so there's a lot of pieces that are kind of going, and we could, if we don't have some place for them to land, I think people will have a hard time finding themselves in it as they build their budgets.
Well, so the way I do it, I thought this was really good. Like I said, I don't disagree. It's very good. And so
I was not offended when you called it fluff, I swear.
when we take it and try and go from it to budget. And so if what we're trying to do is set out a vision for what we would like, this is a great vision for what we would like. Taking it and saying, okay, now what budget decisions do we recommend? To me, that's the hard question. And just saying this is a vision, and it's a wonderful vision, and it's one that's been around, but it keeps getting refined and better. We have clear evidence. We have 3 years. it isn't just happening on its own. Declaring the vision isn't making the vision happen. And so something more has to happen than just declaring the vision.
So it seems like we could take, I like the process that Pam put together with you sort of using the existing places that are really processing this and looking at evidence. And the TEL survey will be another one. I mean, last year we went out and whoever came, and this year we're going to get to more people because, Hannah, aren't we expecting a high level of response? I mean, we're hoping, you need at least a 50% level of response.
We have like 9% right now of all educators, and we're trying for 50% in every building, and we'd love to see 60-70% across the state.
So to me, that's so much more powerful than just a forum where the people who can get their heard about it could get their due, as opposed to really getting inside of all the school buildings and really using their data along with this other data. And then what we're really looking at is step one. And then we just go through the process and add what you said, Dr.
Yeah, I mean, I think, so let me just give just a heck perspective. I would argue, and again, I'm one member, but I think this committee should look at the data on post-secondary attainment, where we are today, how much we're spending, and ask the heck to tell this committee and the OEIB, what is it going to take to improve substantially to get to 40-40-20. We want to report back. We want you to tell us what budgets you need, what changes in need-based aid you need, what changes in funding formula you need to get to that result. And that you should charge the heck to do that. And then we'd have an assignment, but it should start with where are we now and what would you like to accomplish? And ideally, if there's specific things like career technical education, whatever it might be, that the OEIB and the governor think are important, say that. And then you've got a process right now that we have enough time. If we knew that, if the heck knew that soon, we could then spend the rest of the year figuring it out and to put a budget together that I think would be very helpful to the governor. If we don't have the metrics up front with the key goals on each of these areas, we're not going to. It can't just be the public comments. We have to have the metrics now, or we won't have a budget. Because if we're not starting with the outcomes, we won't get where we want to go.
Well, just like we ought to gather data from existing places, we ought to use existing channels. I mean,
Yeah.
I wouldn't at all think that this is the know-all, be-all committee.
Absolutely.
This is sort of the
It's the
coordinating.
Exactly. That's where similar to the quality aid commission. I mean, we should be asking them for advice.
And that, and Nancy just reminded me that last time I brought you a timeline, and really this, some kind of first step where you're sort of giving out a charge to people around what you want to see happen. And then with the months of May, June, July, August being other, people coming here with their ideas, or us synthesizing, staff bringing you the concepts that can then be prioritized for recommendation. I think it's exciting and really, really important that you'll be able to have these groups working in the direction that you ask them to work in. And right now already, just from the listening, I realize we can have a long paper that makes you feel good, but we can then we can have a real tight.
There are communication issues.
A real tight charge and some vision with the metrics and the visuals.
Yeah, the metric, where are we now?
So that people can very quickly, say, okay.
So are there new achievement compacts being done this spring?
The school districts do it in the fall now. There was a bill that passed, which is a more natural time, and universities still do it in the
So I missed
spring.
that. So how does that work?
Yeah.
They commit in the fall for what?
So you as a school district, you bring together a committee, you start talking about your targets, then you start saying, if we're going to reach this target, what do we want to recommend to the budget committee? The budget committee generally doesn't get done till May, sometimes June. So then that's what you get, then you come up with your strategies, that's what you get in place. And so then when your compact comes out in the fall, you're a lot more prepared to say, this is the target we're going to set, and then get it in. So you're doing your pre-work. Yeah, you're starting your work probably in January to prepare for, so when it comes out, you can really say, here's our target, let's get going in the beginning of the year.
So when will we have new compacts with providers?
October.
For K-12.
This coming October, there will be new compacts, and they'll be promising that they're going to do better a year after that, or what will they be promising?
No, for that current year.
For that
So-
current year?
And interestingly, we've put a recommendation in, one of the things that I think has really hampered the process of achievement compacts is that the field, when they look at being asked to set a goal for the next year, it feels it has sort of taken on more of a prediction kind of a model where people are looking at their data and they want to be able to predict where they're going to be the next year, and the sort of philosophy of the compact has always been more about setting a goal
Right,
and then
turns on
changing
its head.
things.
I thought we were saying, as a board appointed by the governor and so forth, the schools need to do this if we're going to get to 20, 40, 40, 20. And then they commit if they're going to come this far or that far. If it's, a year of them going through predicting, then I'd back to put them in the wastebasket.
So one of the recommendations in the report that I gave you this morning to look at is around a 4-year horizon, which I think is something that this group should really consider. This would be asking folks to look at where they want to be in 4 years and putting in place a strategy and a plan to get there. It's really hard I think, for us to get anywhere when we're asking people to set a goal about the next year. In the next year, the die is cast. And so there's some thinking around 4-year strategy that we could be doing.
That's
Again.
down to the fact that if you're on the Titanic, it's okay to be excessively impatient. And people are getting older fast. Most of the young people.
Right.
Yeah, I think what's important with 4 years, it doesn't mean you don't start improving right away. It just means you've really had time to think through a strategy, and then you're going to start moving right away.
Yeah.
I think one of the issues with the compact is saying we're going to improve. It's like setting yourself up for, if you don't hit that mark, and if you're not going to make the investments to put in the strategies and tactics to help you get there, then there's a fear of, well, if we don't have that, then we won't get here, and then the Oregonian will bash us for, being our compact being thrown back at us or whatever it is. But in reality, it's, I think that the conversations that people have had as I've talked with them, it has been very constructive around, here's where our students are, here's what we can do to improve them, and here's where we think we can be. But it's very different. You could have a 3rd grade class 1 year, and then the next 3rd grade class is a totally different makeup, and it will throw off where your 3rd graders are going to be. Some of the smaller districts who have maybe 3 3rd graders in the whole class. So.
Right, but we flipped it. If the notion is just telling each provider, have a good strategic plan for what you're going to do with your kids in school and stuff every year. Okay, great, that's a good thing. They ought to be doing that with or without us telling them that. The idea of a compact was an agreement with the state that you would accomplish certain things. And the state, in this instance, was OEIB, is supposed to be the one designing it. Well, I don't hear any talk anymore about an agreement between providers and us that they're going to do anything in particular. And so calling it a compact, it's not even a compact. It's just they're making their own plans and then going to be aggressive or not aggressive and meet it or not meet it. But in terms of a compact where there's a promise to the state that they're going to do something that advances the ball towards 40, 40, 20, I don't see that.
But it was a two-way agreement. It was a two-way compact.
No, but it's all towards getting to 20,
Right.
40, 40, 20.
So you tell us how you're going to get there, and we give you the support and resources you need in order to get there. And we haven't been able to extend our hand, I don't think, as the OEIB to say, here's how we're going to help you get there. Because we basically had the funding that they've always had, and then a few strategic investments. So I think part of it is, have we taken a compact from the Beaverton School District where they've said these are the things we need, and sat down and said, okay, here's what we can do to assist you, and work through it with them? No. So how do we get there?
In terms of the timing, actually, I think this is a huge opportunity. They're doing their compacts this spring, right? For next year?
They come in the fall, but they start working
They'll be
probably
working this
around
spring.
January. A good district would be.
Doing it
should be
starting in January.
budgeting now.
So if
Yeah.
we put out as part of the instructions, third grade reading is a goal to all the districts, and as you put your compact together, we'd really like to know where you think you could be, and we don't want you to just ask, we want you to be, bold but reasonable with your own understanding. And then as part of the budget process, we would like to know how additional funds might help you, and what I really would go back to Hannah's point, what changes in rules, regulations would help you get this done. That could be a pretty natural input that would be, if they were, thinking about third grade reading as they put their achievement compact, it would be a very natural, and it would be a compact. The state wants to know how it can help you get this done, and we're looking at this, and we're particularly interested in regulatory policy and budget changes that would enable you to get it. That would seem like a pretty natural piece of the compact that could flow right in, could flow right very nicely in this budget process.
It would,
So-
and if we would have, so let's pilot a few locals or really do that, a few districts, and really
Go deep on, yeah.
go deep with them and see how we can really make this work, because I'm with Ron, I don't want to waste anyone's time, and I want them to be successful, but we've got to really understand how they're being used and help them use them correctly in order for it to
County
happen.
would be my vote. What we can do to help them.
So that's thinking about this as another place where, based on what the field knows about OEIB's interests, we have groups like COSA who have already brought together steering committees to look at third grade reading and propose a set of strategies that would then come here. And so I do think there are places for us to begin to pilot this, and a real appetite for figuring out how to link it into the Achievement Compact as we move forward in a way that is not just about asking districts to give us more information without having a real strategy for how to use it. Because I again, fear that sort of going out and asking everybody tell us X, Y, and Z if there's not a mechanism by which we intend to really use it. So, yeah. So I think,
Okay.
did you want to move on to your...
Want to move? Do you have your? You're going to get back to us so we can be constructed in March and April.
Yes, so it sounds like, and I'll just maybe do a quick next step, and you guys can check me on that. But I'm thinking that bringing a sort of abbreviated charge that comes from this document, along with some visuals and metrics that can help guide people's thinking. Back to this group, designing a process that's uses the synthesis of data and the work from various committees that we have, and ensuring the evidence-based screen, bringing that back to you all in some kind of a way, and then some additional thinking about how we might get go really sort of deep and innovative on a couple areas, and how that process might roll out. Do you want to add anything in the context of?
That's good.
Is that good? Okay. And so the original plan was for the full board to see this paper at the next full board meeting, so that they never felt totally out of the loop of the work that you all are doing. Does that seem useful, or would it be more useful to simply report back to them on the kind of process and sort of key pieces of the discussion today?
I think it's a good paper. Like this, it's a good paper. I think the issue is translating from it to action.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And I would encourage you, do both.
This is the vision, and those
So
are the steps.
it's a good vision document. We're still working on an action document.
And good, best thinking at the time. A number of you are on the board, so you can.
Can I make one other request of you all and Danny, maybe as we go through this process? So we're a little piece of a much bigger budgeting process. And it occurs to me as I think about this that there are places outside of the education part of the budget that we might want to place orders that would help enable us to achieve our outcomes. And we may want to receive requests from, I'm making it up, I don't know, healthcare or DHS or whatever, that would help achieve their outcomes. So I don't know what the mechanism for doing that is, but I would request that we create that mechanism and opportunity, because there's lots of hydraulic connectors here.
Yep.
I want to say, just on the sidebar, this kind of debating whether to say it or not, but you know, the comment that you made here on the bachelor's degree and all of that, if you check with Vernonia, they're making $50,000 a year. A lot of people just graduate from high school because they're using natural resources. So I mean, yes, we want to get people highly educated to go into the better jobs and stuff, but there is a unemployed in Oregon individual who could be making those $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 if we'd be using our natural resources. So I mean, that makes it big. The reason I say that again is because when I worked June, July, and August in 61 and 62, I made more money than when I had my degree and worked for the U.S. Bank for 2 years per month. So I mean, so there's a balance there, of course, on what's available. But we also got to get these people unemployed so they get their kids going and all of that. So that's just my little soapbox.
Could I reinforce that? I mean, again, that is one of those opening strategic questions. And again, I would encourage the governor to challenge all of us to focus on those education and training programs that quickly move people out of poverty to jobs. That makes that a big priority in this budget process. And because I think there are, I mean, as you look at the HEX work, we have opportunities that are relatively low cost that I think could take young adults and older adults to jobs. And we got to make sure in this budget process we're calling that out and putting resources to achieve those, if that's a priority to government, which I suspect it is. And so, I mean, so there are some, to Tam's point, there's some larger goals around poverty reduction and you know, family stability that are very relevant to this group's task.
Exactly.
And I think that's what you're saying.
Exactly. It's amazing to me how this all ties together. I happen to be on the reentry council, and it's just like, I mean, geez, it's all
connected.
Yeah.
Right.
The shock there was when I asked the group, has any ever met anybody at the gate and followed them through the first 90 days? That was an eye-opener because I just had myself, so none of them had. Okay, so how can you do reentry, right? Okay, Nancy, let's go ahead and do your report here, and then Seth, do you want to go around and see if there's any public comments? Or do we have somebody sign it? There is? Okay, so we have that list, and so we can get going here.
So this topic is not unlike the last topic. even calls deeper conversation, which is great. But you know, this whole model we did talk about, and Hannah talked about it, support. But then if support doesn't work, what's next? And I think we've never really defined what that is. So what I'm going to do, and I've talked to the heads of the agencies in each level. So John and I have talked, and Rob and I have talked, and Ben and I have talked, and they'll be working with their boards, is that I am going to ask, kind of like you said, each of the, like the Early Learning Council, the Oregon Department of Education, the HAC, to really define what is it when we talk about whether organization's successful or not. Because I have a lot of people saying, well, if they're not successful, then X. And so the first question is, what is successful? What's the protocol? Because it's not as easy as hitting the target on one of these or not hitting the target. It's about your theory of action. It's how you're moving. It's about your improvement. So we'll be asking each of these boards to work on defining what would success look like. You have to have the targets on your achievement compacts as part of those. And I want to remind people these targets are what the research say we need to do to help kids successfully get to 40-40-20. So they're not just things we picked out of the air. There's a few that were not necessarily as deeply research-based as, for example, in the K-12, COSA came forward and said we want some math measures on there. They're not bad measures, but they're not the core ones necessarily to move us along. So we did include a few of those. But generally, I think most organizations think you need more than just what you see on the compact. And what I want to, for example, I think we want to know dropout rates and are people coming back, and we want to know in colleges how many are staying in and when they get out, how many get jobs, and some of these on the compacts or not. So soon they'll be getting a letter that asking them to say what does success look like, include the compact outcomes and other things you think are critical, and then provide us what support would look like and what we need to do if we have to continue to increase the prescriptive intervention around each of these. There's a few other things I did want to say just from this previous conversation. The achievement compacts only have targets. They don't have the strategies. Strategies, and I use K-12, is done over in ODE where you have to put in an improvement plan, a district-wide improvement plan. So when we start analyzing the compacts, all we've got are targets there. So we have to, why I'm thankful for the longitudinal database. Thank you, Peter, who's on the line, for helping lead us on that, because it came out of the Ways and Means with a up vote. Everyone on the committee voted for it. Because we're going to have to take the targets, go over to ODE, grab the data around their report card, because that's really the accountability measure. Then we've got to go up and grab the continuous improvement plan that shows how people said, and we have to put all of that together and look at it as a composite to give us a sense of what districts are doing really good or what aren't. Same thing would be in the university. But first we want to start and say what other measures are that do you think there needs to be there that you want us as for us to look at. And really what the achievement compacts, I think for us, is once we grab all that and analyze it. So I think what we tried to do the first few times out is just look at the target and say they set high, they set low. Well, setting high or low doesn't mean if they met the target, and particularly the trajectory to get to 40-40-20 till 2025. So now that we have the longitudinal database, we can take a lot of this stuff. And once we see the ones who are really beating the odds, and Hannah, this goes back to something you say, I personally am going to get in the car and go to those university boards or go to those school district boards, and I'm going to sit down and say, tell me what you did to get here. Tell us the narrative, that really, your theory of action more, that got you there. And on the other end, we're going to go to the ones who haven't moved, and we're going to talk to them about, here's how other people are moving. Help me understand what's going on here so we can bring you the right level of support. So, but it's not like we're going to go to every little school district. We can't. This is meant to be a governance policy level. This ODE does look at report cards for every single school, and they do get a grade from 1 to 5, and depending on what that is, they get to stay loose or they get to get tighter, and we'll do something similar. So do know the second piece we're doing now is we're really making sure we know what success looks like, and we're going to figure out who's getting there or not, and we're going to learn from that.
Can I ask you a quick question? I thought with the compact there was a narrative as well. I thought they had the compact, and then I thought there was a report that went with that. Is that...
There's not a report. There's a small bit of narrative that comes with it that people, varying degrees of information. The recommendations that the advisory committee does goes to the board, and we do have...
So we don't get that?
It goes to their board, and then they submit to us just an acknowledgement of they're bringing it to the board.
But that might be a way we need to improve.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, I would... In my mind, I was thinking that that's where they would lay out the strategies and tactics, which would be connected to...
And the hard part is we really have been struggling with, again, like I said, if our first move is to ask them to give us all their strategies and tactics, it feels like we have an obligation to really show how we're going to use it and really build that trust around it before our next step is asking them to give us more. It feels like we need to give them some level of assurance that we're using it. That's us trying to be thoughtful about how we approach.
Well, the other thing about that is And this is where people say, this isn't just about money, let's look at rules that aren't working, like,
Right.
are we going to ask a district to do a SIP, a comprehensive improvement plan, and then come back and ask them to do another plan with an achievement compact? So we have to get these things aligned. Districts do decide what they're doing, so that's why we've needed our longitudinal database. So, you know, once, I think we do have information out there, I don't think it's aligned enough. I'm with you, it doesn't make sense, you just sit and say hit a target, and what they're doing, their tactics and strategies don't get reported to us. And it's not close enough to say somebody else is working on an improvement plan over there. So those are the kind of things we have to get in alignment.
The piece, I think there's a difference between understanding their strategy and tactics and understanding what they need from the state to be effective.
Yeah.
And to me, an ideal district is really passionate about getting to the goals that, you know, we have these mutual goals, third grade reading, whatever it is, and they have a plan, and they say, God, we've got this great plan. Nancy, if you would fund us differently or remove these regulations, we would really be able to accelerate our work. That, in my mind, is what the compact was originally about, was this two-way deal where we say, this is what we're interested in, tell us what you're doing to get there, and tell us what you need from us. And so that it is a handshake. So it doesn't necessarily mean we need the whole strategy, but I think it's a great opportunity to get back to the budget process, to say, Nancy, you got to change these rules, or you said we've got all these reports, the ODE, that it's a waste of time, change it. And I think districts and teachers would love that from what Hannah says. I think they would love to have that opportunity.
I think we're going to have to zigzag back and forth, like us give them some ideas and them give us ideas, because people aren't used to doing it that way.
I know.
When you're down there on the ground working, doing this with everything else you're doing, people tend to set goals and they don't even, you know, they don't know about a lot of these rules and regulations. So we're going to need to help support them in, this is what you could think about changing. And, you know, I do want to say that we're beginning some work with teachers around what assessment really makes sense, because there are some assessment practices that are useful, and there are some assessment practices that aren't. And I think we want to really make sure whatever assessment we're doing, it holds us accountable, but it also gives us information about how do we improve our instruction to get to the outcome. So we're bringing together a group, working with OEA and governor's staff to really take a deep look at that. That group could come out with something, kind of like COSA's doing, to then send to a lot of places, but, you know, we just need to support them and thinking about what they could ask for.
And Duncan, just real quick, one of the other pieces, when we ask about barriers in the system, in many cases what we find is a barrier, something that was put in place at the district level. And so part of the kind of the culture change and the working together is to really help move the whole system towards thinking about this.
Welcome to Unified Conferencing.
And that's part of the learning process.
Yeah.
I mean, there are barriers that people perceive, and they don't know even where they are. But I mean, that in itself, actually, it's not a barrier. You don't have to test 3 times a year, whatever it is. I mean,
Okay. Any other comments?
So does this sound like a good way to go?
Yeah. In our county, in the old Commission on Families and Children, we had a group of people called the Barrier Busters, and man, you can't believe the things that were accomplished when people were doing that. Or you need that kind of help, that's easy to do, you know, that type of stuff. And everybody gets a buy-in that way too.
Right.
Okay, we'll go to public comment, and then the biggest thing is going to be scheduling, so everybody be thinking about that next.
I'm just worrying in terms of scheduling. I have to be on a call at 11 o'clock. So
okay, well,
I'm going to be stepping out the door and getting on another call.
Okay, let's do scheduling before that. Seth, can you kind of help
We have a schedule for the year, don't we?
There's a schedule in your red folder.
In the red folder, okay.
The agenda.
I know we had a conflict.
Yeah, there's one conflict that Hannah had and one conflict that Dick had for the next meeting on the 20th.
March 20th.
March 20th.
You'll have a conflict as well.
Because of conflict there
TLC.
with the early learning council meeting. So we'll probably have to find a new date and location for that one. And then Hannah, you had one on the 22nd. Correct?
Okay, we're in better shape than I thought. Then. That's okay. So the March 20th. I mean, that's I guess Well, actually, see, well, Pam, you have a conflict also
I do.
on the 20th.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean,
So we can find another,
I'm not sure that we're going to be able to find something that works for everybody every
Well,
time.
I have a conflict on the 20th too.
Oh, all right, then that's a bad day.
The 20th, it's 3 of, could we move it to the 19th? Could we just move it up a day?
Yeah, let's do that. Hannah, what's it look like for you on the 19th? We'll get back to you, but that's, well, we're in Gladstone in the afternoon, I guess, Pam.
We are.
So we could do
It's
it
an
in the morning.
ELC meeting on the 20th.
But that's in the afternoon and
We
then
could
all
do
day
the-
20th.
I could do the morning.
The morning of the 19th?
Yeah.
So Seth, you'll tell us, you'll move that for us?
so I'll find a location. and send you
I'm out of town on the 19th.
On the 19th, right?
Yeah.
And everybody else, actually, it'd be nice to have it at Gladstone
It works for me.
Why would that be nice?
because we're going to be there in the afternoon.
On what day?
The
But
19th.
we can have it downtown here. Let's have it downtown here. That's fine. We're not very far.
Okay.
We'll get back to you then, I guess, on that then. I thought it was we're in better shape than I already thought we were.
I think we are doing okay, and scheduling out is going to just make it easier and
Yeah,
easier.
you
And
bet.
so, how about Seth will work on sending you March 19th morning as an option, and
Okay.
maybe one other option, and then we'll act very quickly to just set it. And I realize it's probably not going to work for everyone, but that we just think it's more critical that we just get it on the calendar. I don't know how we conflicted with the ELC, but we'll work on that. So, thank you.
Okay, you bet. Good. Okay, public.
So can we
excuse me.
look at the 22nd? Because, I mean, I could do the 20th, now I can't do the 19th, so, and I can't do the 22nd.
You can have the meeting by yourself on the 20th.
Yeah.
None of the rest of us will be here.
Well, I'd be happy to.
I think I can handle it. Probably make a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, you guys will make big
How
progress.
about lunch? There we go.
The 22nd is a Saturday.
May, I'm talking about May 22nd.
Oh, look, we can, let's, all right, we'll send something out for May as well.
Okay.
March is really at the top of my mind.
Yeah.
But we'll send out some ideas for May as well.
It's 10 in the morning. Or 9 to what time we
These
start.
are based off of Google.
Yeah, see, on the 22nd of May, we have that the ELC conflict again, too. Pam.
Well, so, yeah. How,
The 22nd for March. Yeah, May 22nd is the problem with the ELC again.
I don't think
And we're
we
in
actually
Pendleton.
did a doodle on all of those. I think there was a date that was selected, and it was the Thursday.
No, that's right.
So
Yeah.
we didn't do, in my recollection is we
No.
didn't do a doodle.
no, that's
I
right.
was involved in those doodles, but David,
He said he did 3, that's what he
I thought
told
did like
us.
Three
Yeah, we're in
doodles.
Pendleton, so that won't work.
He did an initial doodle, and then we did 3 doodles to get to an initial date, and then said this shall be the date going forward.
Because most committees eventually, it probably should have been earlier, but if you do it early enough and you choose a date, people kind of arrange around it, because otherwise it becomes impossible.
So can you just maybe poll the group again about March, April, and May and see?
Sure.
Yeah, exactly.
So March, April, and May?
Because, yeah.
And I'll give you some thoughts, Seth,
And is
about what
everyone
might work.
okay on the later ones, does it seem?
Do those conflict
Yeah.
with ELC? I mean, this
Okay.
seems to be.
ELC is like, looking at Jada, every other, which did she leave? She left. Every other month on the 3rd week, so.
So this is going to conflict.
19th, June 19th seems to be okay.
Right, but that's the every other month, it's odd
Right.
months, the odd numbered months.
On the third Thursday.
We're usually Wednesday, Thursday, we meet 2
So
days.
it's conflicting with this.
On the odd numbered months, so.
All right,
it
we'll work
conflicts
on
with
this
the
again.
odd.
Sorry.
That's right.
Okay, Ellen, Mackie,
Aye.
fire away.
I just wanted to say that I really appreciate all of the discussion you've had. I think you've been amazingly thoughtful. And I would just urge you to really pursue the idea that if you're going to do a deep dive, that in a deep dives on 3rd grade reading, that evidence stream is really important because that those capabilities, gaps in capabilities open up even before age 3. And so doing a deep dive there really probably means looking really closely at what's going on with the early learning hubs and looking across departments of the state and coordinating and really bringing in and doing something which would be transformative, which would be looking at how you reach those third grade reading goals by starting at birth and bringing together all of the different kinds of tracks that are needed to support families.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Willie Chambers,
Oh, hi.
did you just sign in or did you want to speak?
I signed in, but...
Okay, good, you're signed in. Okay, David, I know.
Oh, I'm just signing in too, so yeah.
You sign any paper?
Yeah.
I think that's we'll have a note over here. We'll just have them sign these notes and then request. Okay. Okay. Anything else for the good? Well, yeah, committee. Thank you for showing up. It was great to have everybody here, and I know you're on the road a lot. So thank you very much.
Thanks.